This is the story of how Brian May chose to leave the stadium lights behind, and why his recent health update has permanently changed the reality for Queen. Followers of the legendary band have spent years watching the 78-year-old balance his deep passion for music against the physical toll of global performances. Rumors about another massive world tour finally met their end in late March of 2026, when Brian May sat down with the Daily Express to clarify his position. His words served as a deliberate explanation for an audience that had been searching for the truth about his future. His tone remained direct while explaining that although formal retirement is not on the table, he is firmly rejecting the rigors of the road right now. This declaration signals that the era of back-to-back international dates has likely finished for good. Poignancy surrounded this revelation because it arrived during the promotion of the Queen II Remastered Edition, a project that looks back at the band's heavier experimental roots. May used this look into the early 70s to pivot toward the reality of his current life, effectively moving the conversation away from archival projects. Physical capacity has remained a quiet concern since a significant health scare 2 years prior, making this public update even more meaningful for worried fans. Since 2024, speculation had haunted his every appearance, but this was the first time he spoke with such finality about his personal limits. The guitar legend appeared to be at peace with a choice he views as a necessary evolution of his lifestyle. A new personal boundary called the months on end rule stood out as the most striking part of his recent public statement. Decades of life spent in hotels and on airplanes often meant being away from loved ones for half a year, a habit the members of Queen once accepted as normal. Extended periods of separation from his home base are no longer acceptable to May, who described the commitment as something he is unwilling to make anymore. Longevity and well-being now take priority for the musician, even when weighed against the massive financial and cultural pull of a traditional stadium tour. High-level touring takes a massive physical and mental toll on the body, and this rule serves as a direct response to those intense demands. Health challenges from recent years provided a silent warning that led directly to the weight of this March 2026 announcement. The Express interview did not dwell on every medical detail, but the context of previous scares clearly informed his new stance on travel. Fans can feel reassured that he is still active and capable of playing his guitar, even though he refuses to gamble with his health for a travel schedule. Maintaining the standards of a Queen and Adam Lambert show requires immense physical exertion, and May believes it is wiser to be honest about his capacity now, rather than pushing himself past a breaking point. 50 years in the spotlight have left the guitarist with nothing left to prove, allowing this honesty to reflect his status as an elder statesman of rock. Reflecting on the remastered Queen II project allowed May to find a natural bridge between his younger self and the man he is today. Celebrating the band's legacy provided a perfect moment to explain that the future will look very different from the past. Curated projects will now be the primary focus for Queen, rather than the chaos and exhaustion that come with life on the road. Accepting this transition away from large-scale touring might be difficult for some, but for Brian May, it remains a non-negotiable step toward a sustainable future. Creativity and involvement in the band's business will continue, but the days of living as a global nomad have officially reached their conclusion. Choosing his own physical boundaries ensures that his final years of public life are defined by his own terms rather than the expectations of a demanding industry. To see why the 78-year-old musician insisted on his months on end rule, we have to look back at the medical emergency he faced in late August of 2024. This minor stroke arrived without any warning signs while he was enjoying a quiet period at home, which proved to be a terrifying shock for a man defined by constant creativity. Recovery became a private matter as he focused on the initial stages of healing before he felt ready to address his global audience. In early September of 2024, the world learned the truth when May posted a candid video on Instagram to explain his recent absence. Followers heard him admit to temporarily losing control of his left arm, a sensation he described as deeply unsettling and difficult to process at first. Looking remarkably calm on camera, his words still carried the weight of the physical struggle that comes with being an aging rock legend. This post served as a brave acknowledgement of his physical limitations and resonated with the millions of fans who have followed Queen for decades. Losing movement in his left arm was a devastating blow because it struck at the very heart of his identity as a musician. Describing the inability to use his fretting hand as a little scary, he likely masked the true panic that a guitarist of his stature would naturally feel. For over 50 years, he has expressed himself through the strings of his famous red special guitar, and the thought of losing that connection was nearly unbearable. The temporary paralysis was a direct threat to his public life, as he feared he might never perform those intricate solos again. This health scare became the main driver for his decision in 2026 to step back from high-stress international commitments and prioritize his long-term well-being. The stroke was a physical sign of the toll that decades of stadium performances had taken on his body, making future world tours feel far too risky. Realizing that the demanding environment of a massive stage was no longer safe, he began to view his health as a fragile gift to be protected, rather than a resource to be endlessly exploited. The memory of that August afternoon remained fresh as he looked toward the future, serving as a reminder that his body required a different level of care than it did during the height of the popularity of Queen. Recovery was only possible because of the immediate medical intervention he received after the first symptoms appeared. Specialists at the hospital provided the critical care needed to minimize long-term damage, and he has often expressed his deep gratitude for their speed and precision. Without their expertise, the outcome could have been far more devastating, potentially leaving him with permanent disabilities that would have ended his life in music entirely. This experience gave him a newfound respect for his own body and the importance of seeking help the moment something feels wrong. Once he left the hospital, Brian began a very rigid daily routine that was specifically designed to help him recover and stop another stroke from happening. His doctors gave him clear instructions to stay away from anything that caused physical or emotional pressure, which meant he was grounded for a long time. He was forbidden from driving or flying and could not even think about performing for massive crowds while he learned the difficult art of doing nothing. This task proved to be a real struggle for a man with such a relentless work ethic, but he followed the rules with the same discipline he usually applied to his music. This new way of living was not just a short phase, because these permanent changes eventually led to the major announcement he made in 2026. Brian started focusing on low-impact activities like biking and swimming to keep his heart healthy and his circulation moving without stressing his nervous system. These exercises helped him find a new sense of peace as his world shifted from global tours to quiet mornings spent in his garden. Having that time to reflect made him realize that touring was no longer possible at 78 years old, so he decided to treat his survival as a second chance. In November of 2025, which was more than a year after the crisis, Brian sat down for a very honest interview on the show Love Your Weekend. This talk was a huge moment for fans who were still worried about how the stroke would affect his health and the future of Queen. He explained that the stroke was a serious wake-up call that he could no longer ignore, especially since it changed how he viewed his own physical limits. It was a rare display of vulnerability, as he admitted that the body eventually demands payment for decades of constant work and travel. He seemed to feel that the stroke was not just a medical accident, but a sign that his old way of living had come to an end. Brian explained that for over 50 years, his life was a non-stop cycle of recording and touring, but the stroke finally forced him to slow down and look at things differently. He was no longer a man in motion and instead spent his time looking back at the thousands of hotel rooms and stage performances with a new perspective. While those years were important, he started to see the heavy costs they took on his health and began weighing the excitement of performing against his own longevity. This process required him to look closely at his priorities and decide what truly mattered for his future. The early part of his recovery was defined by strict orders to do almost nothing, which was very difficult for someone with such a curious and active mind. Being forced to stay inactive was likely the hardest part of the entire journey because he had to learn how to live without a project or a deadline. He called this a necessary time of quiet that allowed his brain and body to heal while he reconnected with the simple sounds of his home in the countryside. This enforced silence helped him find a new rhythm in life by watching the seasons change in his garden and enjoying the stillness he had missed for so long. Swimming and biking became the cornerstones of a new daily routine, designed to protect his heart and keep his circulation strong. Doctors recommended these specific, low-impact activities because they avoided the heavy physical shocks that high-intensity training often inflicts on the nervous system. May found a rare sense of peace in the weightlessness of the water, which offered a quiet escape from the loud demands of his life as a public figure. Cycling through the open countryside allowed him to stay active while staying connected to the natural world he has spent decades defending through his animal welfare campaigns. This consistent exercise served as a deliberate strategy to keep his heart resilient so he could fully enjoy the years he still has ahead of him. That long stretch of quiet reflection eventually brought him to the difficult conclusion that the life of a touring rock star simply cannot work at 78 years old. The intense adrenaline of live shows and the exhausting nature of international travel no longer fit with his medical requirement for a stable and safe environment. While his creative spirit remained as strong as ever, he openly admitted that his body had reached a limit where it demanded a new level of care and respect. This change in perspective became the driving force behind his 2026 announcement that Queen would no longer participate in massive world tours. Continuing the old pace would have invited another dangerous health crisis, so he chose a future based on wisdom and the preservation of his own life. Evaluating his life allowed him to leave the big stage with his dignity intact, choosing a healthy, quiet path over the constant noise of the road. Anita Dobson signaled that the era of grand world tours was closing when she spoke about the band in December of 2025. During an interview that winter, she pointed out that the members of Queen are simply getting older, which provided realism for fans who expected another Trek. Her comment was not a critique of their talent, but a simple and honest admission that the men in the band are now rapidly approaching their 80th birthdays. Because Dobson has supported Brian through every professional peak and every frightening health struggle, her public statements carry a deep sense of authority and truth. She felt the punishing pace of the road was no longer a healthy choice for a man who had already achieved everything a musician could dream of. The simple comforts of their home life had finally become more precious to them than the temporary thrill of a hotel room or the chaos of a backstage dressing room. Before we continue into the revealing interview that confirmed this shift in Brian's priorities, do you believe a legendary performer can ever truly find peace away from the stage after 60 years in the spotlight? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you are enjoying this story so far, hitting like and subscribing really helps us keep making content like this. Now let us carry on. Just a few months after his wife spoke out, Brian confirmed this major shift in his priorities during a very revealing interview in March of 2026. He told the world that he now treasures his time with his family much more than the roar of the stadium crowds that used to define his whole world. While the applause of 50,000 fans is a feeling few experience, May finds a deeper sense of joy in a quiet dinner or a morning walk. This change in his emotional outlook is a massive departure for a man who spent 60 years working to earn the love and connection of a global audience. He has finally found a level of inner peace that does not depend on a spotlight, which is perhaps the best sign of a successful life. Choosing his family over his professional legacy shows the genuine personal growth he went through while he was recovering from his stroke. Brian May spoke with deep emotion about the necessity of being there for his grandchildren, viewing this role as a fundamental part of his daily existence. Watching them grow brings him a unique sense of wonder, and he truly wants to be a physical presence in their lives instead of just a face on a screen. This family focus creates a sharp contrast with the views Roger Taylor shared during a discussion in March of 2026. The legendary drummer admitted he is not quite prepared to walk away from his professional career just to focus entirely on his grandchildren. While Taylor remains driven by the energy of live performance, May has entered a season where being a grandfather matters more to him than being a rock star. Their different paths illustrate how two men who worked together for decades can reach very different conclusions about how to spend their later years. The core of this story involves his firm decision to choose a quiet home life over the massive scale of the Queen and Adam Lambert tours. This choice did not stem from a lack of passion for music, but rather from a deep commitment to the family who supported him from the start. He understands that the legacy of Queen is already safe with millions of fans, so performing on a distant stage will not change his historical impact. Opting for the peace of his own garden and the company of his family takes real courage for a man whose identity is tied to the stage. Trading the intense adrenaline of the road allowed him to focus on a steady rhythm for his physical health. This path allows him to age with dignity while proving that a musical legend can find true happiness in the simple act of being home. There is a quiet power in a man who toured the entire world, finally deciding that his own front door offers the most important view. His journey toward this realization involved a winding road of medical scares and a gradual understanding of his own mortality. Acknowledging that his time is limited has given him the opportunity to create a focused and meaningful final chapter for his life. Pursuing the next major tour or a massive payday is no longer his priority as he looks for ways to support his loved ones. This move away from the spotlight might disappoint some fans, but it remains the most honest way for him to respect his personal health. By proving that knowing when to step back is a vital skill, he is setting an example for both his peers and his fans. The end result is a life that feels balanced and complete, which is something he may not have experienced since the early 70s. His announcement in January of 2026 caused a stir in the music industry because it signaled the end of Queen's era in a major market. During a candid interview with iHeart and Q104.3, Brian May suggested that the band would likely never return to America. This admission was startling because his career was built on massive American stadium shows, and his words confirmed the fears of many concerned fans. He spoke openly about his belief that America is currently a dangerous place, and these safety concerns have become a heavy weight on his mind. This was not a casual observation about the news, but a deeply felt concern that influenced his decision to stay in the United Kingdom. For a musician still recovering from a stroke, The environment where he works is now just as important as the music he creates. Brian May's health issues were already a major factor, but these political and social worries layered on even more pressure to stay grounded. While healing from his stroke was the initial reason for pulling back, how he saw the state of the world began to change his mind about going abroad. He eventually admitted that the high stress of traveling through regions where he felt uneasy was something his body could not manage at 78 years old. The massive adrenaline and physical strain of a world tour are difficult for anyone, yet for a person recovering from a stroke, the tension creates medical risks that are simply too high. It was clear that May no longer felt he had the inner strength to deal with the complications of visiting a country he viewed as increasingly unstable. This shift shows how his choices are now driven by a deep need for safety that goes far beyond his daily physical therapy. Those specific interview remarks essentially acted as a quiet way to cancel any plans for future concert dates in North America. For many decades, the United States felt like a second home for the members of Queen, and it was a place where their music became truly immortal. Hearing a founding member talk with such certainty about never coming back was a heavy moment for the history of the band and the fans who followed them for 50 years. May pointed out that the massive effort of moving a huge stage production across the Atlantic was no longer worth the danger to his physical health. He was very direct about how the anxiety of traveling internationally under current conditions was hurting his ability to recover from his stroke. He requires a steady and familiar setting to keep getting better, and he believed a massive American tour would be the total opposite of what his medical team advised. By talking so openly about these fears, he gave everyone a rare glimpse into the real anxieties that can affect even the most famous musicians as they get older. He has watched the world change many times over the years, and his current outlook is defined by a simple need for security and the comfort of his own house in England. The safety issues he brought up were not just about his personal protection, but about a general feeling of unease when he thought about being so far from his home base. This realization was another major reason behind his March 2026 announcement that he's now putting his private life ahead of his time on the stage. The choice to avoid America was a painful one, but he made it with a very clear focus on protecting his heart and his mental health. He has reached a point where hearing the crowds cheer in places like New York or Los Angeles is not worth the damage it might do to his long-term survival. His health status in 2026 is completely tied to how he views the world, and he believes that staying in a peaceful environment is the most vital part of staying alive. He has successfully traded the chaos of a global tour for a lifestyle that he can actually manage, surrounded by his trusted circle and safe locations. Moving away from the United States is a realistic reaction to a world that feels much too loud for a man who is searching for quiet. He is now deciding to use his limited energy on smaller projects that do not force him to fly over oceans or deal with difficult social climates. This final word on his health and his future as a performer shows a man who is comfortable with his own boundaries. He understands that his most important work now is the quiet life he still has left to enjoy. Queen and Adam Lambert have officially shifted into a period where they take life one day at a time. By March 31st of 2026, they confirmed that no large tours are on the horizon. Moving away from the heavy demands of global travel allows the group to keep their legacy alive without forcing their bodies to endure the grueling pressure of a worldwide schedule. This shift feels like a natural evolution for musicians who spent 5 decades giving everything to their audience, even if the change is difficult for longtime fans to accept. Astrophysics now claims much of Brian May's creative focus, offering his sharp mind a way to stay active without the exhaustion that comes from a 50-show concert run. October of 2026 will see him participate in the Starmus 8 Festival, an event blending science and music that fits much better within his current physical limits. This new path keeps him in the public eye as a scholar, while he stays within the safety of his home to focus on his ongoing medical recovery. Animal welfare remains a central part of his daily life, and he finds that he can advocate for creatures through his Save Me trust just as effectively from home. Staying close to his family and doctors is vital for his health, yet his activism continues to make a real difference in the world without the need for a tour bus. He discovered that his voice carries just as much weight from an office as it does from a stadium, which helped him embrace a more sustainable way of living. 2-hour stadium sets are a thing of the past, but fans might still see him make short guest appearances that keep his love for the guitar alive. When he joined Benson Boone on stage recently, he proved he can still contribute to music by playing a single song before returning to his private life. Since a high-energy Queen show is now too physically demanding, these short cameos will likely be the only way the public sees him perform live from this point forward. At 78 years old, Brian May has finally confirmed that his physical well-being is a treasure he must protect with the greatest level of care. Life changed completely after his minor stroke in 2024, which forced a man of his immense ambition to trade the noise of global fame for a quieter existence. Choosing to age with such transparency shows a deep sense of dignity, proving that real strength comes from knowing when to prioritize time with loved ones. His worth is no longer tied to how many countries he visits, but to the life he builds for his grandchildren as he continues his recovery journey. Putting his family and his health before the demands of the music industry ensures his later years are defined by peace instead of a constant chase. Moving from the peak of rock stardom into a quiet recovery period serves as a powerful example of both resilience and deep self-awareness. Facing his own mortality led him to decide that staying present for his family is the most important role he has left to play. Queen has a legacy that will last forever, and Brian May has earned every right to spend his time exactly where he wants to be, which is home. This update on his health represents a new chapter for a man who understands that the best applause is the quiet peace of an intentional life. His music is legendary, but his true inspiration comes from the way he faces the challenges of aging, with his priorities firmly in the right place.